Okay.
Sweet Jesus, fail more often.
Fail more often. So today is number 60, if you're keeping track. Been a long, strange road.
Gosh, it seems like we've done like 400 failures.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah. So today's topic is religion is useful. And there's this wonderful quote says, religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by the rulers as useful. And there's actually a lesson here. This is popularly attributed to Seneca the Younger, but apparently it's a much more recent clip. And some intrepid skeptic wanted to hunt down where the hell this came from. And he did lots and lots of research and found, this is probably a made-up quote.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. There was some similar quotes in the 1800s that this may have been adapted from. So probably Seneca had nothing to do with it.
Along the lines of the religion is the opiate of the masses, the same sort of sentiment. It reminds me, this time of year in particular, especially now that George H.W. has died, there's a quote from George H.W. Bush about not considering atheists patriots or citizens.
Oh, yes, and that's probably made up as well.
Yeah,
right?
It's probably made up. It's not been sourced. It was supposedly denounced as, I never said this type of thing. It's really hard to tell. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter because the sentiment certainly exists, and it exists not incredibly widely, but it's right up there with this is a Christian nation or those types of things that are just part of the public's perception of who we are, and it's worth it to counter it. And so I never link the quote and never cite Bush for it. Because there's plenty of other things that people have said that are awful. And
Sure. So I guess the lesson is to be skeptical even of the things that you would agree with.
Yeah, especially. But
I do think the sentiment is true. So if the common people are theists and the wise are the atheists, and we have these, true-false debates all the time on this show, what about the religion is useful, and who are the rulers to whom it's useful? And that would presumably be the politicians and religious leaders, right? So why is it useful? Well, simply, religion is the dog whistle for the gullible. And with a little nudging, the gullible can be easily manipulated, and whatever power they have can be at your disposal. And if you think to even the presidential elections that we've had, the various candidates and the religious sentiments of the various ones, Ronald Reagan pretty much walked on water. He was kind of anointed by God. Barack Obama allegedly was a Muslim from Kenya. So didn't even make the mark. Trump is arguably the most evil president in recent memory, but he gets a pass because of his manipulation of the religious, and I don't know, the pussy grabbers for Jesus think he's awesome. I don't know. Obedience is certainly useful, and there is this true effect in psychology where if you have a poster up on the wall with eyes on it, it will influence people's honesty. So if it's like a quarter for a cup of coffee or whatever, people will be much more honest and put the quarter in if those eyes are watching you. And so the religion gives you God watching you all the time. And obedience also, I think, fits very nicely with this idea of a shepherd and flock metaphor. Sheep are not terribly smart and they need to be led around. But remember, the sheep get fleeced and are slaughtered and eaten, and atheists in Texas might say, "Them's good eating."
Yeah.
What about let's see? Jeff Sessions recently was trying to apologize for the immigrant abuse, and he said, "Persons who violate the law of our nation are subject to prosecution. I would cite you to the Apostle Paul and his clear and wise command in Romans 13 to obey the laws of the government because God has ordained them for the purpose of order." And he said this in June 2018. So Romans 13:1 says, "Let among other things, let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power but of God, and the powers that are ordained of God." And so the idea is that
God has appointed your leaders and you are to be subject to them.
Right.
Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter if it's a tyrant. It's this and another verse have been used both to support the divine right of kings and to prevent people from objecting to the government.
Yes. It's terrible, terrible stuff. And there's also the render unto Caesar, Matthew 22:21, supposedly from Jesus. Render therefore unto Caesar the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God's.
Which has always confused me.
Yes.
So there's, when, granted, I grew up Southern Baptist, so they're going to have a particular spin on this, but if you render unto Caesar the thing that are Caesar's, that's about paying your taxes. And in the context, it's, you owe taxes to the government, give that. But it seems to imply that God doesn't need your money. And yet we constantly hear from people who are like, we need your money to do God's work. So it's not that God needs your money, it's this church needs your money to do God's work. But is that...
And how is it that the churches are exempt from this? They seem to have, slipped into something else.
It's actually fun that Don's brought this topic. I would pull this picture up on this screen as soon as we have that technology. Beth found at an antique shop a pamphlet from the YMCA from 1918, so 100 years old. I can hold it up maybe, but
it's not.
It's Some Words of President Wilson About Religion. It's going to actually be the subject of one of the videos that I end up doing this week, talking about church-state separation and how strange it is to have words of President Wilson, not Woodrow Wilson. That's significant. But anyway, continue.
Well, he was an interesting president. Okay, well, religion is most useful for the religious establishment. So think of tax subsidies, which we just mentioned, lack of accounting, and the assumption that religious donations are used for good, which are not necessarily true. And think about all the laws that have been bent in favor of religion. There's a big story in the paper today about childcare here in Texas, and how so many kids are dying and being abused and stuff. Not much mention of religion, but it turns out the religious child care is more or less exempt from all the laws. And so we have people dying in the child care where there are supposedly regulations and laws, but now here we got the religious child care with very little oversight and subsidies, tax subsidies, and all this good stuff, and kind of stifles competition. Hate is certainly something that can be leveraged to control the masses, and nothing gets your base riled up and increases your power like fomenting hate. God hates the infidels, the Muslims, the Jews, the witches, the gays, and so on. And so should the believer. Fear is another good one. Here in Texas, the transsexuals are out to get the children in bathrooms, and we got to be afraid of them. Not really.
Yeah. And the other thing is, I know, and throwing my Southern Baptist hat back on, we didn't actually have hats, but it's figurative. This notion of hate, sitting in the pew for all those years, if anyone told me that I was being instructed to hate others on behalf of religion, I would have told them they were nuts. That is not what it is. It's about love. However, it is undeniable that when you have the us and them mentality, and when you put yourself and the people around you who share your beliefs in a position where we are superior, we are morally superior, that is a form of hate or disparagement against other people. It is very much this is our club and we're the good guys and we have to stand in opposition. We don't hate them though. We, love the sinner, hate the sin. I accept that I can care about someone and despise what they're doing. So love the sinner, hate the sin is potentially a real thing. The problem is, what is the effect of that? If you're trying to reach out to people to convince them that they're doing something wrong or that they need to side with you on issues, if it's immediately read as a personal thing, then it has to be viewed as hatred by those people. It reminds me of the difference between explicit racism and implicit racism, or you can sub in whatever bigotry you want, where there's a difference between I hate this group of people because they're black or Asian or Mexican or whatever it is, whatever the category is. That is the sort of explicit hatred and bigotry. Then there's the implicit one, which is I don't hate those people, but I'm supporting legislation that essentially marginalizes them, takes away their rights, and because I value this other thing more. Mm-hmm. And it's a way of convincing yourself that you're not being bigoted, that you're not being hateful, when in fact you are. You don't have to put on a hood and run around burning crosses to be racist or to have your actions essentially be racist. And that's the kind of hatred that there's
some insidious stuff there.
The soft bigotry of lowered expectations.
Okay.
It's the soft hatred of that as well.
Well, and I think that there's this message that goes along with it that people who are in church are inherently good or inherently, because they're church going, these sorts of things. And so
I would have disagreed with that too.
It influences people's self-image, I think.
It's one of those things where growing up, you knew there were people in the church who were bad. You just did. There's gossip, and there's the potlucks and everything. You knew there were people in church that are bad, and the Bible would specifically point out that not everybody who says Lord, Lord is somebody who's a part of the flock. So you need to know them by their fruits. There's no test for who is or isn't a good person. None of us are good. None of it. We're all terrible. We're just forgiven, and that is the thing that comes up in Christianity a lot. Christians aren't perfect. They're just forgiven. Well, okay, congratulations for being forgiven. That tells me nothing about what kind of person you are.
Yeah.
It tells me nothing about whether or not you've actually been forgiven. You're just convinced you are. I'm not better than you.
Right.
It's just God likes me more than you.
The stuff that matters gets swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Well, religion can be useful to kind of hide scams. And so we have in the United States and throughout the world, the prosperity gospel, which is an obvious fraud where ministers are fleecing that flock. And certainly the child molestation thing has been a big deal, and that's been covered up via church-state separation grounds, among other things. What about the scam of Marian apparitions? This is an old one, right? The Catholic Church created large numbers of pilgrimage sites where Mary supposedly appeared and said hi-ho and did her thing, and these became pilgrimage sites where people came and were looking for cures or blessings or whatever and gave lots of money to the church, and this is a big moneymaker.
For Catholics, yeah.
Yeah. And the subprime mortgage scam of the 2000s was carried out largely, or to a large extent, using black churches, where the mud people got their ghetto loans, according to the folks that were running the scam. Isn't that pretty awesome? So if
stomach turning.
Yeah, if you don't trust, these people who are doing these scams, why do you trust the older scam of Mary and Jesus? Why are they telling? Why do you think they're telling the truth about that? Okay, so religion is useful, but as a vehicle for the unscrupulous to manipulate the gullible. And religions often promise an eternal and infinite reward for some finite and seemingly small payment in this lifetime. Follow Jesus and tithe and you'll be saved is the ultimate scam as far as I'm concerned. And that's just another failure of religion and Christianity.
Yeah, I've talked a few times about, and I'll start by saying prayer works, and then I go on to explain what I mean about the cave-in. I don't need to do it again here today. But this notion that religion is useful, of course it is. Anything that can be used to motivate and guide people, whether it's true or false, can be useful. The question for me is, what is it benefiting? And as you pointed out, by and large, it seems that religions tend to just work to benefit the religions themselves, the churches, the various ministry opportunities and stuff. I'm not convinced that they've done much on behalf of religion to better the world. Now, it's true that we have hospitals that are created and run by churches and universities that are created and run by churches. Those things are definitely, by and large, good things, even though many of the religious hospitals have policies that need to be changed, that need to come in line with proper science and medicine. But when you take a look at what they're doing, it's nice that there's a university, but we don't need religion for a university. It's nice that there's a hospital, but we don't need religion for a hospital. And so this story, this way of motivating people, whether it's true or not, is getting in the way of doing education correctly, of doing medicine correctly. And so by and large, I look at it as this isn't religion giving you a university. It's people giving you a university. Religions have this preferential status where people are just expected to give the money. Mm-hmm. If anything, that's the power. We don't, we raised a bunch of money last week across Talk Heathen and Atheist Experience. It was great. We had a little fun with it. We'll probably do things like that from time to time. We're a donation-run volunteer organization, but we also have our books open to the public. So you can see that, hey, I donated $50 to the ACA, and they used it to, I don't know, go to a strip club and have fun. You would be able to see that stuff. You have no idea where your money is going when you donate to a church because they don't have to open the books. And the thing is, if they were doing something that was clearly in the public good, then there should be no problem with them opening the books and showing that's what they're doing.
Right. Right. Good accounting and accountability is a good thing. Transparency is a good thing.
On that note, we're going to move to calls in just a second, but I wanted to mention the newsletter, which I think they have a graphic